They laughed at her while a man was bleeding out 10 feet away, and none of them knew that the quiet nurse with shaking hands had already buried more soldiers than they would treat in their whole lives, because some people learn how to save others the hard way, and some never learn at all. Let me take you back to where it all began. Ellie stood at the edge of the trauma bay, holding a clipboard that felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the paper, but because her fingers would not stay still no matter how hard she told them to behave. She did not look sick, and she did not look weak, yet everyone around her had already decided she was both. She was older than most of the nurses, quieter than all of them, and she had learned long ago that silence made people careless in ways words never could. One of the doctors leaned toward another and spoke low, but not low enough. "Why do they keep putting her here?" he said, and then smiled like it was a joke meant to soften the cruelty. The other doctor did not answer, but he did not stop smiling either. Ellie heard them, because she always did, yet she kept her eyes forward and her mouth shut, since answering never changed anything. A nurse walked past her and bumped her shoulder without apology, and Ellie adjusted her stance so she would not fall, because falling in front of them would have confirmed every quiet thought they already had about her. She had learned that lesson years ago, in a place far from clean floors and soft voices, where mistakes were not forgiven and weakness was not discussed. "Trauma coming in," someone said from down the hall, and the words cut through the room faster than noise ever could. "Military," another voice added, and that single word shifted the way everyone moved, because military meant pressure, and pressure meant eyes watching, and eyes watching meant careers on the line. Ellie's grip tightened on the clipboard without her meaning to, and she felt the old pull in her chest that came when lives hung on minutes instead of plans. She stepped closer, not because anyone asked her to, but because she always stepped closer when it mattered. "High-speed rollover," a voice called out, followed by fast steps and louder orders, and suddenly the room was full of motion that felt practiced but thin, like confidence built on books instead of memory. Ellie glanced toward the doors and felt something settle inside her. Not fear, not pride, but a calm she only found when things were about to go wrong. She checked the gloves on the table, then the clamps, then the pressure wraps, and she did it without thinking because her body remembered things her mouth never spoke. "Don't touch anything yet," one of the doctors said sharply, looking at her hands instead of her face, and Ellie nodded even though she knew she would touch whatever needed touching when the time came. The doors opened, and the gurney came in fast, and the man on it was big even while broken, wearing torn camouflage and a vest cut open in a rush that told its own story. His face was streaked with blood, his jaw tight like he was holding on to something he refused to drop, and his breathing was wrong in a way Ellie felt before she saw. "He's crashing," the doctor said, too loud, too fast, and already pointing at the wrong problem. Ellie did not speak yet. She watched, she listened, she counted, and as they moved around him, chasing noise instead of truth, Ellie saw it, the thing they all missed, the detail that did not scream but whispered, the kind of whisper you only hear if you have learned to listen while others panic. Her hands shook harder now, not from fear, but from knowing what came next, because stepping forward would cost her, and stepping back would cost him. She took one step closer anyway, and before anyone could stop her, before anyone could laugh again, Ellie spoke, soft but clear, and said the words that would change everything. "Check his pelvis," she said. The room kept moving, but no one responded. It was like her voice didn't register, like it slipped through the air and landed nowhere. The lead doctor, Whitlock, kept pointing to the man's chest, shouting for suction, shouting for more blood, shouting for a scan that would take too long. Ellie took another step. "There's no entry wound," she said again, this time louder, but not yelling. "His chest isn't the bleed." Whitlock turned, annoyed. "He's got blood pooling in the thoracic cavity, nurse." "No," Ellie said quietly. "He doesn't." Now he stopped. He was younger than her by at least 20 years, tall, sharp-jawed, and the kind of man who had been praised too often for the wrong things. He looked at her like she was the last person allowed to speak. "You're not even on this case," he said, voice clipped. But Ellie's eyes were on the soldier, not on the doctor, not on the other nurses. She moved to the other side of the gurney and gently pressed down on the man's left thigh. His whole body twitched, The 4 beeped again. His pressure was dropping fast. She didn't wait. She reached down and lifted the leg of his pants with both hands. It took 1 second, maybe 2. Then the blood came. Not a slow seep, a pulse. Bright red. Strong. Arterial. Someone gasped. Femoral artery rupture, she said, already moving, already reaching. Clamp. Now. Whitlock stepped forward, half blocking her. Ellie, stop. You're not cleared. I said clamp. There was no panic in her voice. There was no begging. Just force. Clean. Final. A younger nurse. Maybe new, maybe scared. Placed the clamp in Ellie's outstretched hand before realizing what she'd done. Ellie dropped to her knees beside the gurney, pushed her left hand into the wound, fingers deep, her right hand guiding the clamp. Blood soaked her arm. It ran down past her elbow, but she didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Pressure's coming back, someone muttered. Ellie didn't look up. She counted her breath in 4s, just like she used to. In 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. She wasn't in a hospital now. Not really. She was back under canvas. In the mud, 1 flashlight, 2 bandages, and 5 dying boys. Back when backup was a word people said too late. The soldier on the table let out a broken breath. Vitals stabilizing, the monitor tech said. Ellie stayed where she was. Still, hands deep, not moving. Get a second clamp, she said finally. We'll lose him if it shifts. Now they listened, because now he wasn't dying. Not anymore. The cleanup felt slow. Nobody said much. Whitlock barked a few orders, trying to look like he'd always been in control. A different doctor stepped in to finish the work Ellie started. She stood in the back of the room, blood on her hands, her chest tight. No one thanked her. No one even looked at her. She washed up in silence, scrubbing under her nails until her fingers turned red from water instead of blood. The faucet squeaked. The mirror above the sink was cracked in one corner, and her reflection stared back at her like it was someone else. She didn't look brave. She looked tired. When she walked back to the hallway, Whitlock was there with hospital admin. A woman with a clipboard and a mouth that didn't move unless it was to say policy. Eleanor, the admin said, voice too smooth, too clean. We need to speak with you about today's actions. Ellie waited. There were procedural violations, the woman went on. Dr. Whitlock has submitted a report. Ellie said nothing. We're placing you on leave, she added. Effective immediately. No emotion. No hesitation. She might have been reading from a script. I understand, Ellie said, because she did. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just reached down, unclipped her badge from her pocket, and held it out. The woman took it with 2 fingers. Security will walk you out, she said, like it was normal, like this happened all the time. Ellie nodded again. Her hands still smelled like iron. The walk down the hallway felt longer than it was. Some nurses stepped aside. Some pretended not to see. No one spoke. Her shoes left faint prints on the floor, water mixed with old blood. Then the elevator doors opened. She looked up, and the world shifted. For men stood inside. Not doctors. Not nurses. Military. SEALs. One of them had a split lip and bandaged shoulder. Another had a service dog beside him, calm but alert. The third man wore dark sunglasses, indoors. And in the center, leaning on 2 crutches, stood the soldier from the trauma bay. The one she had pulled back from the edge. He was pale, sweating, and staring straight at her. Then he dropped the crutches. Both fell to the floor. He stood, slow, shaking, pain across every part of his face. But he stood. He raised his hand, slowly, like it weighed 50 pounds, and saluted. The room fell silent. No beeps. No voices. Even the air stopped. Ma'am, he said, voice broken. I never forgot you. Ellie's breath caught. She didn't move. I was 23, he said, still holding the salute. You pulled me out of a basement in Kandahar. You had a dog with you. One eye was clouded. You told him to stay, and he stayed. Ellie's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. He reached into his jacket. pulled out a cloth, unwrapped it, a metal tag, old, bitten, scorched on one edge. His tag, the soldier said. I kept it. I didn't know where to send it. He placed it in her palm, then whispered, "Whiskey, right?" Ellie looked down at the tag. Her fingers closed around it. Slow, careful, like it might vanish. Then she looked up and said, quietly, "Yeah." She said it once, just that one word, and it felt like it scraped its way out of her chest instead of her mouth, because saying his name meant opening a door she had welded shut years ago. The men around the commander shifted, not sure what to do with the moment, because they were trained for noise and orders, not silence that carried weight. One of the security guards cleared his throat, then stopped, because no one in that hallway could pretend this was routine anymore. Whitlock stood a few steps back, his face pale, his mouth slightly open, watching the scene like it was happening to someone else. The commander lowered his hand slowly, like it hurt to do even that, and he nodded once at Ellie, the kind of nod that wasn't thanks but respect, the kind given between people who had shared something no one else in the room could touch. "They told me there was a nurse who stopped the bleed," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I knew it was you before I saw your face." Ellie swallowed and finally felt the burn behind her eyes grow sharp enough that she had to blink. "You shouldn't be standing," she said, because part of her still lived in the rules of keeping people alive, and worrying was easier than remembering. He gave a small smile. "You always said the same thing." One of the SEALs stepped forward then, a tall man with tired eyes, and said, "They're trying to walk her out." Like it was a fact that offended him on a personal level. The administrator stiffened and opened her mouth, but the commander spoke first. "She's not going anywhere," he said. Not loud, not angry, just certain. "If she leaves, I leave. And you can explain that to my command." That was when the hallway really changed, because power shifted without anyone raising their voice. Phones came out. Someone whispered. Another nurse covered her mouth. Whitlock tried to speak, but nothing came out right, because every word he had prepared belonged to a world that no longer existed. Ellie looked down at the dog tag again, felt the teeth marks along the edge, remembered kneeling in dust with her hands pressed against a wound, while Whiskey leaned against her leg, steady and warm, waiting for her signal. "I thought you died," she said, softer now, not looking up. The commander shook his head. "You didn't let me," he answered. The security guard quietly stepped back, unsure who he was supposed to listen to anymore. Ellie's badge was still in the administrator's hand, and for a moment no one moved, because moments like that don't rush themselves. Then the administrator slowly extended the badge back toward Ellie, her voice careful. "Maybe we should talk," she said. Ellie didn't take it right away. She looked at the commander, then at the men behind him, then finally at Whitlock, who couldn't meet her eyes. "There are things you don't put in reports," Ellie said, calm but firm, "because they don't belong to you." She took the badge, clipped it back on, and the weight of it felt different now, not heavier, not lighter, just honest. The commander leaned on one of the SEALs again, his strength finally giving in, but his eyes stayed on Ellie as he was guided back toward a wheelchair. "I'll see you soon," he said. "That's not a question." Ellie nodded once, because she knew when a promise was being made. As they rolled him away, the hallway slowly found its noise again, but something had cracked, and it wouldn't seal back the way it was before. Whitlock turned and walked off without another word. Ellie stood there a moment longer, the dog tag warm in her hand, and for the first time in years she didn't feel like a ghost passing through other people's lives. She felt seen, and that scared her almost as much as it healed her. She didn't know yet about the letter that would be waiting at home, or the name written inside it, or how the past she buried would come knocking with no intention of leaving. But as she turned back toward the trauma bay, one thought settled in her chest and stayed there, quiet and steady, because some lives circle back when you least expect them to, and some people remember exactly who saved them, even when the world tries to forget. She walked back through the hospital corridor, slower than before, not because she was tired, but because something in her had shifted. People still moved around her. Nurses with charts, orderlies pushing beds, a med student trying to look like he belonged, but none of them looked at her the same anymore. Some nodded. One even smiled, She didn't need that. She hadn't come for recognition. But it still meant something. Ellie reached the staff lounge and opened her locker. Her bag was there, same place it always was, and she stared at it like it might tell her what to do next. She wasn't going home. Not yet. Instead, she sat down on the bench and opened the bottom pocket of her bag. Inside, wrapped in an old soft cloth, was a photo. Faded at the edges, creased down the middle from being folded too many times. It was her. Younger. Dirt on her face. A cut above her brow. And beside her, crouched low, mouth open like a half-smile, was Whiskey. His one cloudy eye didn't make him look broken. It made him look older than the rest of them. She ran her thumb over the photo and remembered the sand, the noise, the silence that followed. She remembered the way he stayed when she told him to, even when the ground shook. And she remembered going back after the smoke cleared, calling his name once, twice, 5 times. He never came. Whiskey had been trained to stay behind if it meant saving the team. And he had. Ellie closed her eyes for a second. Then she tucked the photo back into the cloth, folded it twice, and placed it gently in her inner pocket. By the time she stood again, the tension in her shoulders had eased just a little. Her phone buzzed. She checked it. Unknown number. One message. "Ma'am, package left for you. Apartment door." That was it. No name. No ID. She didn't answer. She just grabbed her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked out. Her apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, nothing fancy. She liked it that way. Simple, clean, quiet. But tonight something waited. A plain manila envelope sat against her door. No writing on the outside. No postage. She looked down the hall. Empty. She unlocked her door, picked up the envelope, stepped inside, and locked the door behind her. She didn't turn on the overhead light, just the lamp by the bookshelf. Then she sat at the table, placed the envelope flat in front of her, and opened it. Inside was a folded letter, and beneath it a badge. Not a hospital badge. A black one, with gold trim. Angel Unit 03. Field Medic. Call sign, Valkyrie. She stared at it. For a long time, the letter was typed. Mostly. But at the bottom, someone had signed it in pen. Bring her back. We need her. There was no name. But she didn't need one. Ellie sat back in her chair. She hadn't worn that name in over a decade. Valkyrie. Not because she was anyone's hero, but because she went where others wouldn't, and pulled people back. Alive. She looked around her apartment. Nothing in it looked like her old life. That had been the point. But maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to be what she'd been pretending not to be. The badge was cold in her hand. But it didn't feel strange. Felt like something that had been waiting. She looked at Whiskey's tag again. Still in her pocket. Still warm from her palm. And for the first time in a long time, her hands stopped shaking. Ellie didn't move for a while. The badge sat in her hand, and the letter rested on the table beside it. Her apartment was quiet, but not the comforting kind. It was the kind of quiet that made your heartbeat feel loud. She didn't turn the letter over again. She didn't need to read it twice. She already knew what it was. Not a job offer. Not a favor. A call. And you didn't say no to a call like that. Not when it came sealed, not when it used her call sign. Valkyrie. A name she hadn't heard out loud in 12 years. She stood up and walked to the kitchen. Opened the cupboard. Took down a mug. Chipped on the side, her favorite one. She made tea like she always did when she needed her hands to stay busy. Her fingers moved without thinking. Boil. Pour. Steep. Stir. She didn't taste it. She just needed the warmth. Her eyes kept drifting back to the badge on the table. She hadn't even told anyone she was alive. Not really. After the last deployment, after Whiskey didn't come back, she had stepped off the map. Not dishonorably. Not in shame. Just quietly. She'd signed the discharge. Folded the flag. Packed what little she had. And disappeared into normal. Or tried to. But normal had never fit right. It scratched at the edges of her. People thought being alone was sad. But for her it had been safe. Until now. She finished the tea, washed the cup, and then she picked up the badge again. At exactly 6:40 a.m., her phone rang. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was marked Ellie Gray. She stared at the name for a second before answering. Ellie, that voice. Calm, heavy, real. Gray, she said softly. It's been a while. 12 years, she said. I should have called sooner. You didn't have to. There was a pause. A real one. The kind that lets both people feel everything they're not saying. Then he said, "He told me you saved him again. He was lucky I was in the room." "No," Gray said. "He was lucky it was you." Ellie didn't answer. He let the silence stretch again. "We could use someone like you," he said finally. "You already know that's what this is. I'm not the same. None of us are." She looked around her apartment again. Everything in it was small, neat, controlled, and empty. "I'm tired," she said. "I know," Gray replied. "But this isn't just about saving lives anymore. Someone out there wants him dead. And they know who you are now. You've been seen." That hit harder than she expected. "You think they're coming?" she asked. "I know they are," Gray said. "You're not safe there. Not anymore. And he's not safe without you." Ellie closed her eyes. "When?" "Tonight," he said. "We'll have eyes at the park bench by 11. Leave the light on. We'll see it." She hung up without saying goodbye. He didn't expect one. Ellie packed fast but careful. She didn't own much, and even less of it mattered. A few changes of clothes, her worn leather journal, the photo of whiskey, a set of field tools she hadn't touched in years. She left the books on the shelf, the dishes in the sink, the tea in the cabinet. What she took fit in one small duffel. She paused at the door and looked around once more. This place had been quiet, safe, but it hadn't been home. Not really. Not since she left the field. She left the porch light on, then walked down the stairs with the bag over her shoulder and whiskey's tag around her neck. The street was dark and empty, just like most early mornings in this town. She turned left at the corner, her steps steady. She didn't look back. There was a park 5 blocks down. Empty benches, playground missing 2 swings, grass that needed cutting. She used to walk here at sunset just to hear the birds. Now it felt different. She sat on the 3rd bench from the road and placed the bag at her feet. Her fingers tapped the tag against her chest without realizing it. 11 o'clock came and went. At 11:07, a man walked past. Tall, black hoodie, no eye contact. At 11:10, a second figure appeared, not walking, just standing under the broken streetlight. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. Then a car pulled up. Not fast, not loud. A black SUV, tinted windows. It stopped just past the park entrance. Passenger door opened. A voice she hadn't heard in more than a decade came out soft and low. "You ready?" She stood, picked up the bag, and got in. They didn't talk much on the drive. Didn't need to. The man in the passenger seat was Gray. Same voice. A few more lines around his eyes. But still the man she'd followed through places most people didn't survive. He handed her a file. She opened it. Photos, printed emails, a hospital log, redacted names. "Someone in that hospital sold his location," Gray said. Ellie turned the page. "How many people know?" "Too many." She flipped to the last page. A satellite image. A small facility. Nothing labeled. "You want me to go back in?" "We need someone who can work without backup. Think on their feet. Quiet. Smart. And you think I still can?" Gray turned his head slightly. "You're Valkyrie." She didn't smile. She just nodded once. Then closed the file. They reached the compound by 2 a.m. Private facility. Off-grid. No signs. No guards visible. But Ellie knew better. She could feel the eyes watching as the gate opened and the car rolled inside. Inside was quieter than she expected. Hallways white and clean. Not a hospital. Not military. Something in between. Gray led her to a small room at the end of the hall. Inside, a woman sat at the table. Mid-30s. Calm. Hair pulled back tight. A scar above her left eyebrow. Ellie, she said. We've been waiting for you. Ellie nodded. You ran Med Unit 7, didn't you? Years ago, the woman replied. Now I run this. She slid a folder across the table. This isn't just about the commander. It's about who's coming after him. After us. You're not here for one mission. You're here to help build something that can survive what's coming. Ellie opened the folder. Inside were photos, maps, notes. One page was handwritten, signed with a name she hadn't heard in longer than she liked to admit. And then she saw it. A list of names. One had a line drawn through it. The name above it read, Dr. Brian Whitlock. Her stomach sank. He's connected? The woman nodded. We think he leaked the file. We think he's tied to a group who wants the SEAL commander gone. And they won't stop with him. Ellie stared at the page for a long time, then said quietly, Then I won't stop either. The woman across from Ellie leaned forward, voice even. You sure you're ready for this? It's not like before. There's no backup unit. No ranks. No one coming to help if it goes bad. Ellie looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. She turned the page in the file. Tell me where he is, and what I need to do. The woman slid another envelope across the table. Inside were new credentials. Ellie James, again. A different hospital. A new city. A fast-track hire under a new trauma director who had no idea what she was walking into. You're going in clean, the woman said. He won't expect to see you. No one will. Ellie held the ID badge in her fingers. Felt strange. Being new again. Being invisible again. But this time on purpose. She looked back up. And if he's not working alone? We'll know by how he reacts when he sees you. Ellie stood, bag still on her shoulder, badge in her hand. The woman nodded. Good luck, Valkyrie. 3 days later, she walked into Riverside Memorial. New badge, new scrubs, same silence. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She kept her head down. She worked nights. She made herself small, and she watched. It took less than 48 hours before she spotted him. Dr. Brian Whitlock. Different coat, different hospital, same perfect hair, same smug tone. He didn't recognize her. Not yet, but she saw how he looked at other nurses, how he dismissed patients who couldn't speak for themselves. She watched him lie on reports, inflate stats, cut corners, and she waited. Until one night a trauma came in. Car crash. Young girl. Internal bleeding. Whitlock took charge. Ellie followed into the trauma bay, hands gloved, face calm. The girl's pressure dropped fast. She was cold to the touch. Whitlock called for fluids, chest tubes, and scans, but Ellie saw the signs again. Wrong location. Wrong focus. It wasn't her chest. It was her liver. She stepped forward. We're losing her. You need to. Whitlock turned fast. Not you again, he said, voice sharp. I don't know how you keep showing up, but this is my room. Ellie didn't flinch. Your ego's going to kill her. Other staff froze. A few nurses exchanged looks. Someone stepped back. Ellie moved around the bed and found the bleed. Her fingers pressed, firm and sure. Clamp, she said. No one moved. So she said it again. Louder. Clamp. Now. A hand reached out. Younger nurse, scared but willing, and passed it to her. The pressure steadied. The girl gasped, then breathed. The room breathed with her. Whitlock stared. You're not supposed to be here, he said quietly. Ellie looked at him. For the first time, directly. You sold out a soldier, she said, just as quiet. You sent killers after a man you couldn't even save. His face changed. Then he ran. Ellie didn't chase him. Security caught him 2 minutes later in the stairwell, trying to leave the building. 2 agents from the unit arrived within the hour. They had the files, the wire, the calls. Enough for a sealed indictment. By morning he was gone. And so was Ellie. She left before the sun came up. No goodbyes. No reports. Just a folded photo of the girl she saved and a quiet smile tucked into the pocket of her jacket. Later that week, back at the compound, Gray waited by the front gate. He didn't say anything when she walked up. He just opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, she placed her bag down, unzipped it, and pulled out something new. A harness. Old, torn, familiar. Whiskey's. She hung it on the wall beside her bed. Someone knocked on the door behind her. It opened. The woman from before stepped in. "We've got another lead. But it's bad." Ellie didn't turn around. She clipped her badge onto her chest. "Call sign Valkyrie." Then said, "Tell me where." The room was quiet again. The woman waited by the door, but Ellie still hadn't moved. She stared at the harness on the wall. Old, frayed at the edges, a little crooked, but standing there like it had always belonged. "Is it him?" Ellie asked without turning. The woman stepped closer. "No, but it's someone like him, and they've taken people." Ellie breathed in through her nose and turned around slowly. Her eyes didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. "Then we go." It took just 3 hours to get there. A farmhouse, hidden deep in the woods just outside Winchester, Virginia. From the outside it looked abandoned, but inside, satellite footage showed movement. Guards, heat signatures, and 2 missing medics. One of them was only 19. Ellie wore the gear without hesitation. Plain clothes, simple pack, tools only. She walked with Gray again, side by side, no words between them, just steps, steady and synced. At the edge of the trees, she crouched and studied the windows. "No sound," she said. "No lights, but too much heat for a quiet house." Gray nodded. "Basement." "I'll go," Ellie said. He didn't argue. Inside, the stairs creaked under her boots. Dust in the corners. A half-drunk cup of coffee on the table. She moved like a ghost the way they used to. Each room cleared. Each breath measured. Downstairs, the basement door was cracked open. She listened. Heard breathing. 3 voices. 2 low. 1 shallow. Fast. She pushed the door open with her boot. The 2 men inside turned too slow. They saw a woman with no weapon. Just calm eyes. And then they dropped. Gray came in behind her. Zip ties. Quick. Clean. In the back corner, tied to a chair, was the 19-year-old medic. Ellie crossed the room in seconds. "Hey!" she whispered, kneeling. "I've got you." The girl was bleeding from her shoulder, a bruise across her jaw, but her eyes were clear. "You're Valkyrie?" Ellie smiled, small. "Not anymore." She cut the ropes, wrapped the wound, lifted the girl with care. "She's light," she said softly to Gray. "You say that about everyone," he replied. Later, outside the farmhouse, medevac took the girl away. She was stable, awake, alive. Gray stood next to Ellie, arms crossed. She said they kept asking her about the commander. Files, names. Who knew? "They won't talk now," Ellie said. Then Gray handed her something. Collar. Old. Dirty. Dug up from the far side of the farmhouse. It was torn, but the tag was still there. Whiskey. Ellie held it in both hands, like it might fall apart if she wasn't careful. "You think they found him?" she asked quietly. Gray looked down. Maybe. Or maybe he just never left. That night, back at the compound, Ellie sat alone by the fire pit. The collar rested beside her. She stared at the flame, not thinking, just being. The 19-year-old medic was safe in the recovery ward. Gray was debriefing the team. The wind was soft. She finally reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her folded photo, the one with whiskey by her side. She held it next to the collar. And this time she did cry. Not loud, not shaking, just 1 tear. Then another. Then stillness. Because some grief doesn't need to be loud to matter. Some love never dies, even when the dog does. In the morning, she didn't suit up. She went for a walk instead, down the long gravel path behind the compound. At the end was a quiet hill, just grass and sky. She knelt there, opened a small tin box. Inside were 3 things. The dog tag the SEAL commander had returned, the collar Gray had found, and the folded photo. She buried them all together under a flat stone. No words, just the sound of the wind. And then she stood up and walked back, By the end of that week, Ellie handed in her badge. Not because she was quitting, because she was finished. The woman at the desk looked up. "Where will you go?" Ellie smiled softly. "I don't know yet." "You're not staying?" "I've done what I came back to do." The woman paused. "You were the best we ever had." Ellie didn't answer. She just turned and walked out. Somewhere across the world, another trauma team saved a life. Another nurse stood in silence, unseen. Another rookie medic looked at a scar and wondered what it meant. Ellie didn't need them to know her name. She just needed to know she left them something better than what she found. That night, far from hospitals, far from war, far from blood and whispers, Ellie sat on a small porch in a quiet town where no one knew her history. She had a cup of tea in her hand. Her hands were still now, and she smiled without needing a reason. Not because she'd gone back, but because she'd finally come home. Thank you to my amazing family for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, I just know you'll love what comes next. I've prepared something even more exciting and surprising that I can't wait to share with you. Just click on the end card appearing on your screen right now to watch the next one.